Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to trace the 30-year journey of social media. We're talking about how we went from these tiny dial-up forums, kind of like digital campfires, all the way to the global giants that, well, pretty much shape our lives today.
All right, let's just jump right in. What you're looking at here is basically a map of that journey. It shows how we got from these super simple dial-up systems to the massive global platforms that, really define our world. And to make sense of this whole crazy story, we're going to break it down into 4 distinct ages.
So, let's start at the very beginning, back in the 20th century. This is long before likes or shares were even a thought. Back then, the internet had, well, you could call them digital campfires. These were the very first places where the idea of an online community was actually born.
Believe it or not, this all kicked off way back in 1978 with something called a Bulletin board system, or BBS for short. Seriously, just picture a local digital community center that you had to dial into with your modem. Fast forward to the 90s, and suddenly we have GeoCities, which let pretty much anyone carve out their own, weird and wonderful little corner of the web. And then comes 1997, and SixDegrees.com shows up and introduces a concept that would literally change everything: the user profile.
And right here, this is where you can see the first huge shift in online culture. See, BBS was all about the group, right? It was people getting together to talk about shared interests. But GeoCities, that flipped the script entirely. It turned the focus onto you, your personal page, your unique way of expressing yourself. This was it. This was the birth of the individual online identity. And get this, even way back then, people could see the massive potential here. In 1999, Yahoo, that Yahoo, paid $3.57 billion for GeoCities. That number was just staggering at the time, and it was a massive signal that the whole business of online community, it was about to get very, very serious.
Okay, so the calendar flips to the year 2000, and with the turn of the millennium, boom, the race was on. All of a sudden, the internet is faster, it's more accessible, and you just see this flood of new platforms popping up, and they're all competing for one thing: to connect us.
And wow, what an explosion it was. In 2002, we get Friendster, which was really the first to nail that friend of a friend idea. Just 1 year later, LinkedIn shows up to organize our professional lives. And then, you've all heard this story, in a Harvard dorm room in 2004, Facebook is born. And at the time, it was just for college kids.
The speed at which people jumped on board was just insane. Look at Friendster. It got to 3 million users in just its first few months. 3 million. This proved without a shadow of a doubt that people were starving for this kind of digital connection. The demand was just absolutely enormous.
And really, all these different platforms were built on one simple but incredibly powerful idea: a social network. They gave everyday people like you and me the tools to build a profile, connect with other people, and share stuff. I know, it sounds so obvious to us now, right? But back then, this was the revolutionary engine that was driving this entire era.
All right, moving on to the mid-2000s. And this is when that chaotic free-for-all, it starts to settle down a bit. You see a few heavyweights emerge from the pack, and they're not just playing the game, they're starting to rewrite the rules as they go.
This was such a pivotal time. In 2005, MySpace was the undisputed king, no question. It was so big that News Corp snapped it up for over $500 million. Then in 2006, Twitter comes on the scene with this totally new idea: keep it short, that 140-character limit. But the real earthquake, that hit in 2008, when Facebook finally overtook MySpace in visitor numbers. And just like that, a new king was crowned.
And can you just imagine the confidence of these new players? At the same time Twitter was launching, Yahoo supposedly came knocking on Facebook's door, wanting to buy them. But Facebook, they said no. They believed they were onto something way bigger. And you know what? They were right.
This was also the exact moment that we, the users, started to figure out our own collective power. In 2009, Facebook tried to change its terms of service, and the user base just revolted. The public outcry was major. The backlash was so intense that only 12 days later, the company completely backed down. It was this huge, clear sign that the relationship between these platforms and their users was becoming a two-way street.
And that brings us into the late 2000s and early 2010s, what I like to call the billion-dollar era. This is the moment social media stops being just a cultural phenomenon and becomes a truly dominant force in the global economy. And the numbers, well, they get really, really big.
Just look at this. It's wild. Remember that huge $580 million MySpace sale in 2005? Seemed like a lot, right? Well, just 5 years later, Facebook's private valuation was already hitting 41 times billion. That's billion with a B. The scale of this whole industry had grown by almost 100 times in just half a decade. It's just mind-blowing.
And of course, the public markets were absolutely desperate for a piece of the action. So when LinkedIn decided to go public in May of 2011, its share value more than doubled on the very first day of trading. That was all the proof anyone needed. Wall Street was officially all in on social media. But then you have the other side of that coin. Just 1 month after that huge, triumphant LinkedIn IPO, MySpace, the old king of the hill, was sold off for around $35 million. What a stunning, stunning fall from grace.
So, as one giant fell, others were soaring to heights nobody could have imagined. And that brings us to this incredible number, 200 million. In July 2011, literally 2 weeks after MySpace was sold for scraps, this was the number of tweets being sent out every single day. The contrast between those two stories, it's just stunning.
So by 2011, the whole ecosystem was basically mature. You had LinkedIn passing MySpace to become the #2 social site in the US. You had huge brands like Starbucks hitting 20 million likes on Facebook. You had Twitter users firing off 200 million tweets a day. I mean, even Google was trying to get in on the action with its own network, Google+. The point is, the social web wasn't some niche corner anymore. It was the internet.
So there you have it. We've gone from these clunky dial-up forums to a global industry that has, for better or worse, fundamentally reshaped our society. That was the wild story of the first 30 years, and it leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? What on earth will the next 30 look like?